Okay, so today I'm going to be reviewing Skyward by Brandon Sanderson, the sequel to Starsight. That was wrong. Okay, so today we're going to be reviewing Starsight by Brandon Sanderson, which is a sequel to Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. I already have a review for Skyward. I'll link it in the corner and down in the description. But today we're going to be talking about Starsight, the sequel, which I finally have read. So I'm going to start with some brief spoiler-free thoughts, then we're going to dive into a couple of spoilery thoughts, and then I'll have my final thoughts at the end, timestamps if you want to jump around. So spoiler-free, book 2 surprised me. I expected it to go in a really different direction than it went. For starters, there's a time jump between books 1 and 2. I think 6 months have passed between the two, so there's a little bit of catching up to do at the beginning of the book. It took me a little while to get into this book because it was a lot of, here's where we are now because you've missed some things, as far as, you know, book 1 ends with some pretty big reveals and some pretty big cliffhangers. At least it felt that way to me. And then book 2, they've already processed these things and they've already made some progress. So we have a little bit of catching up to do. So the beginning of the book was a little bit, not hard to get into because I still enjoyed myself, but I didn't start running with the characters. I needed to catch up a little bit. After a certain point, I didn't have any trouble picking this book back up. I think that beyond the beginning catch-up point, for me, this book was so well paced. As always, this is only the second book, as in the first book, the action scenes are just incredible. I mean, Sanderson's already good at action, but I'm on the edge of my seat in every single action scene in this series. Just putting them in ships in the air somehow it feels like Sanderson's showing off how well he can do these action sequences. So that's the same, on the edge of my seat every time they're in the air. But not only that, there's a lot of maneuvering in this book, a lot of sneaking around, and I think he built up the tension very well. And in book 2, we're in a completely new place with a cast of almost completely new characters, which really surprised me. And as always, Sanderson's world building is incredible. We got to meet a lot of new, spoiler free. It's fine, right? Because this is the premise of the book. We're introduced to a lot of new types of people and new societies, and it's so interesting to watch him paint these and to see how he describes them, to know their cultures, especially the way that they view the world and the societal standards that they have is all so interesting. I also have some cons, which I'll go into in the spoiler-filled section, but for the most part, I enjoyed this book so much. I had a great time reading it. It was a really easy, fast, fun read. I'm impressed with Sanderson's ability to shift out of epic high fantasy into young adult sci-fi and to pull it off so incredibly well. This is much more plot focused than book 1 was and much less character focused. This character work is still done fantastically well, but it's less of a driving emphasis, which is the main thing that was a con for me in this book, but it was still fantastic. I still really enjoyed reading it. I'm gonna dive into spoilers now, so check the description for timestamps to hop over to my final thoughts if you want to skip the spoilers. Spoilers! Where do I even begin? I think I enjoyed this book from start to finish, but it wasn't until the last, I don't know, 70, 80 pages that I loved it so much. I mean, Sanderson's always good at endings, but my golly, this was a great ending. Spensa trying to figure out how to be a spy of sorts in this new environment, this new alien situation, was interesting. It wasn't a plot line that I I was looking for. And I think Sanderson executed it really, really well. And I was interested the whole time, but I wasn't in it like I was with everything that was happening in book 1. I still enjoyed myself with this plot a lot, but it wasn't a plot line that interested me as much as I would have liked it to. Again, I think that the worlds that he created, the different cultures that he created, so interesting. I loved learning about the way that they reproduce, and I loved Spensa's very human reactions to everything that she learned about these different I keep wanting to say people. Is that correct? These different species. I loved seeing her very human response and her kind of pushing back on some of these things, and then their very natural response of, it doesn't make sense to you because it's not your culture. It's mine. It makes sense to me. I really enjoyed the way he did that. I also loved all the new characters. I don't think there was a single new character that I didn't enjoy getting to know. Easily my favorite new character is Moramir. I also really, really enjoyed Braid. She was a character that I really didn't expect. I didn't expect it to turn the way it turned with her, but I loved it. I loved exploring the dynamics about how she was raised and the perspectives that she has and her conflicting ideals. I think he did so well. Oh, also, what's his name? The guy who used to be royalty, but he doesn't act like royalty at all. I loved his character too. There really wasn't a character that I didn't really enjoy. And like I said, even though this is less of a character-focused story, the character work is still so good in this book. I think one nitpicky, whiny complaint that I have is while I loved the cultures that he built up, I didn't love the way he described all these new creatures so much. Like a lot of times it would just be, these guys look like hamsters. These guys look like ferrets. These guys have big heads with spikes. And I guess it's so niche to me and it's so nitpicky and whiny, but it makes sense to me that Spensa would start making correlations, that she would say, wow, they kind of have like the fur of a hamster and the snout of a hamster and then the ears of a dog, and I don't know, like it makes sense that she would make correlations, but sometimes, a lot of times, these new cultures, these new species would just be described as they were hamster-like, and I wanted more uniqueness than I picked something from the world and I superimposed it in space. New culture. Not new culture. He built cultures really well, but the descriptions sometimes I found really lacking in how these different species looked. While we're talking about things that didn't work for me, I guess I'll mention the one big thing that made this book, I mean, I loved it. I enjoyed reading it so much, but made me like Skyward a little bit more, other than just the fact that Skyward was very, very character-centric. And I wanted a little bit more of that in Starsight, but also if you've watched my review for Skyward, I'll keep it brief, assuming that you kind of know my general thoughts, but with Skyward, one thing that really tipped that book over the edge from, wow, this was a really fast, fun, great story, to I connected with this so much, the thing that tipped me over was the fact that Spensa was written. Her personal struggles, her personal battles with her father being labeled a coward and her not believing it and her fighting for her honor and or her name for not being labeled a coward as well, and fighting to be in this flight school that she's been idealizing, that she's been planning to do her whole life. And then the way she deals with her trauma, the way that she deals with the trauma of the label that's been given to her father, losing her father, having to defend his name as much as she does, the way she's dealing with this trauma is by building up these walls, coming off really aggressive and deflecting and pumping herself up, trying to make herself look bigger and stronger and emotionless. And in reality, inside, she's got so much going on. And I related to that so much. Spensa looks so much like 14, 15-year-old Murphy looked. And the way she dealt with her trauma and the way she processed the world, it was like I was stepping into the shoes of my past self. And it's really incredible because Sanderson accomplished something that I've never related to a teenage character on the level that I related to Spensa as my teenage self. And I really attached myself to Skyward because of that. And I was excited to see where Spensa went. I didn't necessarily expect Sanderson to continue to make Murphy superimposed into every book he wrote in this series, but I was just so attached to Spensa that I was excited to see what her own journey looked like. And in book 2, I didn't feel that same attachment to her. I still loved her. I still loved seeing her really struggle because now she's in a role that she hasn't been thinking about her whole life. She hasn't been training for her whole life. She hasn't been expecting her whole life. It's something totally foreign, totally unexpected, and that she's not very good at. At least she really struggles with. And I loved seeing that. I thought that was really, really cool to see her character go through. It was also great to see a lot of character growth in her from book 1 to book 2 while still maintaining a lot of her rougher edges. It was all really well done, but I just didn't relate to her. Again, I didn't expect to relate to her on the level of Skyward, but I didn't really relate to her at all in this book. So this is a totally personal thing, completely personal thing, but I still loved Skyward more than Starsight, even though I think the execution of Starsight was phenomenal, just for those personal, the way I connected to Spensa versus the way I connected to her from book 1 to book 2. And I wouldn't want anybody to be deterred from reading this book because of something that's this unique to me. But one more one more thing that made this book just a little bit less to me was that it felt like not just a sequel, but it felt like a totally different story. We lost a lot of Spensa's flight crew in book 1, but we kept a few. We kept Kimlin, we kept Jorgen. Wow, I lost his name for a second there. And I'm happy that we kept some of them, and I was excited to hang out with them more in book 2. And we didn't. Really, Jorgen and Kimlin could have been removed from this book entirely, and it would have been the same book. We got a little bit of cool intrigue and a little bit of progress on detritus through Jorgen, and a little bit of something more is coming here. But that's all. And even in Spensa's head, while we're in this new environment, she doesn't even really think about Jorgen and Kimlin. I mean, they're pretty much just not in this book. And I didn't like that. I would have really liked to, I would have liked for them to be more of a presence in this book. Obviously they couldn't have come with her, but maybe more communication, or she could have at least thought about them some so that we could relate to her missing them. I felt very detached, and I wanted more, maybe even just more perspectives from Jorgen's point of view, and even some perspectives from Kimlin's point of view would have been great, so that it felt less like, oh, by the way, they're still here, and it felt more like we're still getting some of the cast from book 1. But again, it's not a huge complaint, it's just, man, I would have liked more from them because this is totally new. I mean, it's like a clean slate almost in book 2, other than Embot and Doomslug. And I would have liked more from our old cast. Okay, now that I'm done giving my cons for this book, the stuff that didn't work for me perfectly, I want to reiterate, I really enjoyed this book. So let's talk about the ending, because holy cow! First of all, her leaving Embot behind, I was not ready for that, and I did not appreciate it. I mean, it was so well done. He did such a great job, and he got all of the emotions out of me. Sanderson, I'm talking about. Sanderson got all of the emotions out of me that he was supposed to get out of me. And I'm mad at him for that, because I didn't want to feel this pain. I did not consent to this pain going into this book. That scene where she had to leave him behind, it hurt me so much. I had to just stop and deal with my emotions when I was reading that scene. Especially now that we're dealing with the reality that he's not entirely an artificial intelligence, that there is some sort of humanity in him, that there is some sort of person living. He's alive in some way, shape, or form. And we don't know what that looks like. We don't know what that means, but we know it's there, which I appreciate because he's always felt alive. So I really like kind of twisting my brain into a knot to try to help me understand that this artificial intelligence is also living and has the ability to make its own decisions and thoughts and warp its own worldview. Like, that's so cool. But now that we're dealing with that reality and trying to wrap our heads around that, now we're gonna leave him behind. We're gonna have the scene where he asks her not to leave him. I'm sorry, rude. I can't deal with this. That was such a good scene and it hurt me so much and I'm still mad about it. I know he's going to be in the next book. I know he's going to be fine. I know they're going to be reunited. Sanderson wouldn't hurt me that bad, would he? But oh my goodness, it hurt. Then you have the whole scene where Spencer does go back to detritus, only for Braid to show up and for Spencer to have to make the really tough decision to try to kill her. Oh my goodness, again, that scene was so good. That final sequence of action and what that opens this world up to and what that opens this sequel up to. I'm actually really thrilled that I put off reading book 2 as long as I did, because that means that I don't have to wait very long to get book 3, because that ending was so fantastic. Stop it. Be quiet, sir. That ending was so fantastic. I cannot wait. I cannot wait to see what we do from here. And I expect in book 3 to get a lot more of Jorgen, a lot more of Kimlin. We're going to reunite Embot and Spencer. We're going to maybe explore civilization and culture on detritus more. Like, I expect a lot of great from book 3. So hurry up and write it, Sanderson. Back into spoiler-free stuff for my final thoughts. I loved this book. I thought it was fantastic. There were some things that made me enjoy book 1 more than book 2, but the two are so neck and neck. They're so close in my mind for my enjoyment level that we might as well say I love them on the same level. I thought it was a really interesting sequel, went in a direction I was not expecting, but I was very happy with the direction that it went in, and I cannot wait for book 3. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on Starsight. I would love to chat with you more about it in the comments. How did you feel about it? Did you enjoy it as much or more or less than Skyward? Be sure to chat with me more in the comments. I post videos every Tuesday through Friday. I'll see you guys again soon.